Hello, everybody. I'm John Dunn, and welcome to the Elation Hour. We are back for episode 4, and we're taking you back to reminiscing on episode 1, more about behind the products. As always, I'm joined by Matthias Heinrichs. Hello, Matthias.
Hey, John. Welcome to another week.
Looking forward to this one. And to keep social distancing, even though the rest of us are all here in California, we have Elation Service Manager Henez, who is coming to us from his office.
Hello, gentlemen.
And we have Product Manager for Magmatic Effects, Anthony Velazquez. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, John.
So today's episode, we're going to discuss a little bit about Elation Service and Support and how that's set up and some of the tools that are available to everybody on a regular basis. And then we're going to follow up that with some insight into Elation's newest brand, which is Magmatic, or the group of companies' newest brand, which is Magmatic, and really what went into developing that product offering. We're going to start with Henez. And Henez, why don't you give everybody a little background about yourself so they can get to know you better?
Well, I started with the company in August of 2007, so I've been here for a little bit. I was fortunate enough to start here as as Elation started pretty much skyrocketing, so that was kind of neat. Formerly, I worked for or with Mercedes as a technician and diagnostician. 3 generations, my grandfather, my dad, and myself. So it was an interesting transition, but it was an easy one to make. Electronics, mechanics, and also technical management. So it was well worth it. I'm glad I made the move. So I'm very happy that I'm here, part of this organization.
We are really happy to have you as well. And I'm sure as a lot of our long-term customers who have seen pre-2007 into now, the impact that you've had joining this company and some of those experiences you brought over from such a big organization like Mercedes. Why don't you give us a little overview about how the service department's sort of set up, both here in the headquarters and then globally?
Well, here, the main headquarters, of course, is in Los Angeles, and our service department here, we have approximately about 10 technicians and then a support staff of approximately 6 to 8. The technicians do participate in the support as well. So oftentimes, if we're dealing with a client that has some technical issues that require more than a simple 10, 15-minute phone call, we'll always have the technicians participate and take whatever time is needed to talk one of our colleagues through a repair. Within our facility, the main parts department here also at any given time, we have well over 7 figures in parts and inventory at our cost, basically. So it's very rare that we back order any kind of parts. And also for the support structure, we have many service centers available, both throughout the U.S. So I'll just name a few, but I happen to have the list here because it's getting bigger and bigger every year, which is really good for our clients. They can have local availability for their service needs. So on the East Coast, we have J4 in Maryland, Davidson Electronics, Florida. We have Seal, which is in the Orlando area. They service a lot of various theme parks as well. We're working on Nashville right now as well. Going into the Midwest, we have Light Parts, Toucan Productions, Gemini. Moving to the West Coast, we have Blue Planet in Las Vegas, Witty Lighting in Arizona, and then of course our corporate offices here. Globally, we have authorized service centers all over this globe. The LA office in particular handles kind of the Western Hemisphere, in addition to Asia and Australia. But we have service centers in Mexico, throughout Latin America, and Canada as well.
Fantastic. And then, of course, we have our European office as well, which works closely with us, and you obviously here.
Yeah, and just the European office handles obviously all of Europe, Africa, the Middle East, and Russia.
Fantastic. So now that we've kind of given the overall structure of how our department is set up here, why don't you give us a little insight into some of the tools that might be available to our end users or everyday people who come across our product and need to be able to find some information?
Well, for the most part, you're always welcome to call in. For our colleagues within the industry, typically we have them set up with a login for our Dropbox. Basically, we are working on a dealer login as well, which should be ready end of this month. That's specifically for our dealer network. So outside of our dealer network, they're always welcome to call in or pardon me, email us at service@elationlighting.com. Anything they need, whether it's parts, service manuals, updates, anything at all, they're welcome to call us. Sometimes we'll get phone calls that aren't service related per se, but it's a little bit beyond, for example, a sales call in the sense that they ask us for our opinion. Hey, what do you think of doing this product for this particular feature or what we were trying to accomplish? And we'll lend our support towards that as well.
Awesome. So let's kind of get into a little bit more of how service plays into the wider organization. And one of I think the questions that a lot of people bring in, and we had Matthias on as episode 1 to talk about the Elation product focus. So how does you as the service manager and our other service people that you coordinate with across the globe play into the product development process?
Well, we really work hand in hand because it doesn't make sense not to. So, coming from the automotive background, it used to drive me nuts when I would see things that were designed in such a way where it's like, if you designed it just a little bit differently, it would make everybody's life a lot easier. So what typically we do is when we have a sample that's come in, typically we'll have the technicians kind of go through it and make their recommendations as far as like, it might be something as simple as just the cable routing to, instead of a Phillips screw, let's use thumb screws. Just real common sense stuff that I hate to say it, sometimes engineers can overthink things in any industry, right?
Don't take it personally, Matthias.
Yeah, right. But but in our case, it lends valuable support because they come from a different mindset where they'll be on location and have to resolve something with a handful of tools. So that's the feedback that they will always provide to them and just basically the experience that they have. Well, most of our in-house technicians have been with us a very long time. I mean, probably the youngest technician has been with us 5 years and the oldest has been with us 20 plus. So they're really part of our family and we value their opinion. And every technician has the ability to stop something. So if there's something in progress and they catch something, there's no bureaucracy involved. They just send that email, and whatever their recommendations, if it makes sense, we implement it immediately. So our relationship with R&D, it's almost one and the same.
Yeah, to expand on that a little bit, we actually have a process when we evaluate products that come from the engineering group. We do this actually in the US and also in our European office. So there is dedicated products shipped out. There is a review process where everything's really gone over piece by piece, and serviceability, accessibility, what tools to use is a big part of this. And we have made changes for sure that are coming straight out of the service department's feedback, and that then gets implemented into the production line. We usually, commonly when you design a product, the first run, what you may call a 0 series, that's actually products that we build for internal tests, maybe for a trade show. They're actually not meant for the customers. They're really our own products that we use to fine tune some of the production work. And sometimes it can be as simple as adding another wire retainer or maybe a couple less wiring clips somewhere. A zip tie in the right place can really make your life easier. It may just help you to put a lid back on a fixture without pinching a wire by accident. And these minor details actually matter a lot when you're out in the field. So there's a lot of work done together with the two service departments in Europe and the US. And we really take that feedback into our production, and then hopefully it'll help the technicians out in the fields when they work with our products.
Inez, we actually have a question that kind of pertains to this scenario. So as you guys are working along with these, production zero products, are you guys kind of coming together with like a key parts list or a main parts kit that we need to bring in first, or that people should keep on hand as they're servicing their products?
Well, that typically occurs in the final stages. So let's say generally speaking, let's say a client's going to invest in Maximus, like, they're going to take 50, just for an example. We will work with that client's service department to come up with a care package, if you will. Especially if they're going to hit the touring market right away, then for sure we have everything ready to go for them as a kit, so they have it on hand. That comes in handy. It makes my life a lot easier. Believe me. And, there's no rush shipments. So typically I'll get together with one or two of our technicians and just come up with that list. Also depends, to tell you the truth, what exactly, we'll get more details, what exactly they're going to use it for in particular. I know it's light, but it can have multiple applications. So based on that, we'll make recommendations, and it's generic type stuff. It could be a display, a motor drive card, whatever it may be. And and again, it depends on the quantity. If they're going to be doing a lot of traveling, we will add a little bit to that, especially if it's international, because then the logistics become an issue. But that's never an issue. We always have that available to all our clients.
This comes actually up a lot. Elation is very strong in the touring, in the cruise market. So often we get this question from the cruise lines, what is like the right parts to have on hand on the ship, because it's actually not that easy to get parts sent into a vessel that, so we actually provide them like a must-have kit and list. Often damages are not necessarily, it's not the fault of the fixture. There's like mechanical issues that happen. People damage something unpacking it. We've seen a forklift or two through a fixture. So having some sort of pre-made lists available and providing the parts ahead of time is quite helpful, especially when it's like ships or theme parks. And Ines is like very involved in that.
Well, that's great. So what you guys are saying is we kind of really do on a project sale by sale basis and provide a list on a one-to-one scenario. Obviously, we have a tally of those things, but we don't post those. We make it on a case by case basis, correct?
Correct. And every client's needs can be similar, but from time to time they can be unique as well. So it's important for us to reach out and communicate with them so we can, we don't have a crystal ball, but we can better forecast what their needs may be once they hit the road.
Awesome. So obviously we've touched on the serviceability piece, and we did touch on some key markets, particularly you mentioned Maximus. I think there's a pretty big misconception in the marketplace, and we get questions a lot on the sales side about IP-rated products, particularly moving heads and their serviceability. Can you perhaps dispel some of the misconceptions that might be out there in the market, Inez?
Sure. So when I first started here, we were already in the IP market. Obviously not the moving head, but we were quite seasoned within that market. So once we started getting into the moving heads sector, it was kind of an easy transition. There was some little growing pains here and there because obviously you're dealing with a moving head. But the one thing I always stress to people or colleagues that are in the industry, technicians, at the end of the day, it's just a moving head. If you strip away the shell, on a non-IP head, an IP20 or something like that, it's going to be a plastic. On this one, it happens to be metal. But outside of that, it's the exact same moving head. You contrast a Monet with a Maximus, you'll find a lot of interchangeable parts in there. Again, it's just the shell. The important thing is once you're done servicing it, is just sealing it. That's basically it. And for the most part, I mean, if when it comes to working on the chassis of it, if any seasoned technician will be able to handle it. Typically, once we speak for a little bit, they're like, okay, we get it. It's pretty basic. The only thing you really have to worry about is when you're sealing it is making sure your gaskets are properly in place and torquing all the covers to the proper specs. Once you are done, though, we do have our own IP tester. The IP tester can be used for moving heads. It can be used for static fixtures. I happen to have one here. It's hopefully you guys give me 1 second.
Take your time.
So this is kind of the case that it comes with, and basically the IP fixtures, whether it's a moving head or a static fixture, has what's called a vent valve. It's actually a little membrane that allows kind of the fixture to breathe internally, and it's a very simple procedure. You're going to remove it. On a moving head, you're going to have two of them, so you're going to have to cap one and use this on the other. You connect it to the IP tester, and it performs a two-phase test, so it's both pressurization and vacuum. And then depending on the size of the fixture, it has a profile, and it's basically calculating the leak rate. It's going to have a leak rate no matter what. It's not 100% seal, like, for example, a refrigerator, if you will. But it calculates. So it's acceptable amount of leakage that's going to happen, and that's within its tolerance. The other thing, one thing we learned about IP fixtures is no matter what, you're going to have some sort of moisture get in there. So X amount of condensation is within tolerance. The important thing is that you have a duty cycle. And what I mean by that is a good example is with the maritime industry. Early on, they were 6 months away from finishing up a ship, and they would start to install these lights. Well, they're in a coastal environment with varying temperature ranges. And after 6 months of being installed, that condensation accumulated, and these lights were just full of water. So we basically told them, look, that's the last thing you want to install. So as long as if you see a little bit of condensation that's normal, turn the lights on, let them run for a while. It'll push that. Once the fixture gets up to operating temperature, that's what the vent valve is for. It basically kind of pushes, for lack of a better explanation, pushes that moisture out, that little vent valve. That vent valve is serviceable. So every so often, if you're using these fixtures in a type of environment that's heavily dust, like, for example, EDC type, something that's out in the desert, you do have to look. You can actually look at the membrane itself and see if it looks brown, you got to change it. So, but again, very service friendly. Any questions, give us a holler. We'll talk you through it.
In your experience, Inez, is there any environment that is a little bit more harsh on IP rated fixtures? Is it that dry, dusty environment more than it is really the wet or the snow or the cold?
Believe it or not, there is one misconception with IP. So IP in and of itself, like you get into 65, 66, and 67, it presupposes freshwater conditions. So when you're in a coastal environment, you have to be very careful with that. It is, by its nature, just more corrosive. I mean, if you've ever been on a cruise, not that that's a popular thing nowadays, you'll notice they're always painting. Our fixtures in particular, we do offer a maritime coating, and it's amazing. That process has really paid off for itself, where you would have fixtures that were specifically made for the maritime industry corroding, and ours are still in service, 8 to 10 years. Well, I shouldn't say 8, 6 to 8 years roughly on some fixtures, and they're still in service. So I would have to say coastal environment, especially once you get towards coastal environments like towards the Caribbean, where the pH level is a little bit higher, it has a tendency to be more corrosive than for say, than say like northern parts. So dust is also a big thing, but for the most part, you can see the damage. So when you're taking that equipment offline and bringing it back into your warehouse, you can actually see it. So most guys will clean it up. So they kind of, by default, they see it with with maritime use like that, it's something that happens slowly, so you don't see it until it's there. So
interesting. Well, so now that we're on the topic of unique technology, obviously there's been a kind of a big push into high power LEDs with our Artis line, previously with our Satura line. I think something's been pushed out is the concept of replaceable LED engines. I know Matthias touched on this a little bit. What's your insight on that, Inez, from a service perspective?
Well, in general, when we looked at when we first got into the Platinum series, the discharge lamps, they just run hotter. So the heat signature of the unit itself has a tendency to be hot no matter what, and that takes its toll on all the components inside, whether it's a PC board or steppers. Even with high power LEDs, the internal operating temperature is less than, for example, a 21R lamp. But from a service standpoint, I love it. It really brought up the reliability factor of the unit itself. The one thing I will say is when we started getting into extended warranties for LED fixtures, we started doing a little bit of the analytics, which we do anyway, but we wanted to be more precise about it. And we found in one of our series, one of our earlier high power LED sources, we had 3 versions of it: a spot, a CMY, and a profile. When we started looking at the failure rate of the LED engine itself, we found that it was, I looked at the numbers again, and it ended up being like less than 1%, like 0.13%. So that's why we're confident in offering that extended warranty for it, because it's just something that doesn't wear. And even when we looked at the failure rates of the ones that we replaced, they weren't catastrophic, meaning they didn't just go out. It was typically, hey, that light shifted color a little bit. There's something wrong there. And within the cluster of the LED engine itself, we may find 1 or 2 that were out. So it wasn't catastrophic failure. But for the most part, I just see them as being very service friendly, very reliable than your traditional discharge, just because the lower heat signature.
Interesting. So not just catastrophic failure, but even when you're saying in this 1% that we did the evaluations on, it's really just like a color shift or it doesn't match existing other product that's in the market kind of scenario. Yeah.
I happen to have one here from when we were doing the research. So typically you can kind of see the honeycomb effect. And typically we would just, within that failure, again, they weren't completely out. It was just like a line or a strand, for example, that you'd see out. And also, just so you can kind of get an idea, they're very service friendly. So if you had to swap out an engine, it comes as a complete piece for the most part. And replacing it on our newer series is extremely easy. One caveat to that is on the IP fixture, it is a little bit more cumbersome than for example, a Monet, just because you have the chassis in the way, kind of a bridge portion of it. But for the most part, any type of experienced technician can swap that with ease.
Got a time estimate by chance?
Actually, I challenged your team. I remember that when we started Monet and we went to this 950 watt range fixture, so I have like an engine, was one of those LED plates that's in there. I did a challenge on that, so how long does it really take for somebody to get in there, open the fixture, put it in, and it's about 15 minutes. There's actually no different than, let's say, doing a retrofit on a discharge fixture where you say, hey, let's swap the reflector on the UV glass. I would actually think swapping an engine is a lot less of a mess than trying to take a reflector out of a traditional discharge fixture. So as another example where we worked with the service department and, give us your opinion, how accessible is this? Is this designed well? And I redid this test when we saw this engine replacement become, something of a marketing thing. We say we really designed these products so that they never have to touch the engine, ideally. I mean, the whole point of these LED engines is that you actually never have to get to it. And so even though it can be replaced in, let's say, about 15 minutes, would think that the engine is like for the lifetime of the fixture.
Fantastic. So it seems most LED engines are pretty interchangeable, and the likelihood of having to do that is less and less, hopefully as these get more developed too.
Correct. And when you get into the hours with the LEDs, like if you've had a fixture in use, whether it's a moving head or a static fixture, and it's been in use for a while, the main thing you want to get into is the longevity of the fans themselves. If you have healthy fans, you're keeping that engine nice and cool. It's going to last a very long time.
Awesome.
Yeah, we actually do long-term tests on these engines too in our R&D, and we see that the color temperature and spectrum is very stable over time. So they gradually lose a little bit of output, but as does your existing discharge fixture. Your power supply, your glass, everything in there will age as well, and you can easily lose 30-40% of the initial horsepower of a fixture after it's in service for a few years. And with LEDs, you're actually going to see much more gradual and a much more stable light quality out of it over time.
Great.
What he said.
We just have a few more minutes left with you, Hanez.
No problem.
So what have you been working on sort of in this downtime for our industry?
Well, we've been trying to kind of make it a little bit easier for our partners, our dealers out there to have their own resources. So for all the dealers that are listening, the one thing I would recommend, first of all, is if you haven't signed up for our dealer portal, please do so. Eventually, all this is going to tie into that. But for the most part, register onto our forums, which is forums.elationlighting.com. Eventually, there's going to be a separate tab for dealer login that'll be implemented towards the end of this month. And then you'll have access to pretty much everything I have access to, which is going to be, again, service manuals, firmware updates, any kind of information. There's little cheat sheets that we'll have there and some videos as well. So that's very important. Please start creating that account now and logging in. We want to take care of you as best you can. And again, I know there's a lot of people that hate calling in, and if they can click on something and find a solution, then it saves us time too. So definitely. So look for that to be implemented towards the end of May.
Right. And then there's like sign up for notifications too. So say I bought Artiste, I sign up for that form, I can get push notifications as updates come. Correct.
So within the forums themselves, there's several different categories. I mean, there's for example, Magmatic as well. It's in there. You can select that one, and yeah, you'll get notifications when there's an update. For example, somebody added something, somebody changed something as well. So.
Thank you, Hanez. Anthony, thank you for waiting so patiently.
No problem.
So for those of us who don't know Anthony is the product manager for Magmatic. Anthony, why don't you give us a little background about yourself and Magmatic, as it's the newest addition to the group of companies?
Sure. I started with Elation about 6 years ago. I started as a sales assistant. I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved into the B-Stock sales guy, and started learning more of the product, getting internal information, and as far as service and just details on how we put our fixtures together and how we develop them. And I did that for 2.5 years, and Atari specialist position opened up, and I was able to interview for that, and it was a good fit. So I decided to go with Atari as a specialist, and I was able to travel to Taiwan and visit the factory, and it was an amazing experience to learn so much more about the product and how they do things there. And then I was able to travel and visit the customers and get some feedback from them. And now that kind of transitioned into the Magmatic product manager role. And I'm here to talk to you about Magmatic and how we came about developing.
So for those people who may not know what Magmatic is, since it is pretty new, what is Magmatic?
So just to give you some insight on Magmatic and why we wanted to develop this line is because we, over the years, we had been distributing Antari, but Magmatic really gave us the opportunity to address some of the gap issues in the market and allow us to really address some of the questions that our customers had when it came to products. And so I was traveling and visiting customers, and they would give us, ask us questions like, can we do this? Can we do that? And luckily, we have such a great team at Elation. Matthias is part of that team. And so many in-house experienced veterans, we were able to build, the Magma Prime, the Chris. I mean, we have so many good product units out there right now, and it really meets the criteria for all the customers that we're asking for these units.
So Magmatic is a effects company, right?
Correct. Yeah.
What kind of products are brought in that group? So is it just atmospherics, or is there other products in there as well?
So we have atmospherics. You have fog, snow. We also have a fan, and then we offer Prisma, which is our UV series, and as well as we are going to come out with our new Atmosity fluid line. So we have a few things coming out with Magmatic.
So let's talk about that. What kind of timeline are we talking about now? So what's available today, and what were those first products that you really worked on within the Magmatic line?
Okay, so some of the focus products that we had coming out that we released back in after LDI was the Magma Prime, which is a water-based hazer, and it's a very punchy, sleek designed water-based hazer for a variety of customers. And we decided we thought that would definitely fill the need there for a water-based haze machine. Then we also came out with the Crisp, which is a snow machine. It's silent and high-powered, and just a great machine that is also serviceable. And that's available now with the Magma Prime. We also have the Prisma series, the UV, that is available right now. And we also have a few SKUs of the Atmosity that will be available this month.
Great. So you touched on this Prisma series. That's a 365 nanometer UV product range, correct?
Correct. So the 365 nanometer is a very unique market. We had a lot of customers ask us about this, and specifically they wanted 365 nanometers. They wanted a variety of beam degree angles. They requested IP65 and also a blacked out filter accessory. So we were getting a lot of requests for this, and this is how we decided to build Prisma. Starting with the LED, the 365 nanometer, we used the Nichia LED, a very high-end LED with very limited visible light emitted from it. So it gives you, it's a safer wavelength, but you can still get less visible light from it. Then we also focused on building or researching silicone UV resistant lens. And currently there is a 20 degree out on the market, but there was a need for a wider spread. So we developed a 45 degree. And this was difficult because the UV resistance was so important. And we needed to make sure that it wasn't going to brown after a while. So we offer a 20, a 45, and we also came up with a 90 degree open scoop reflector, which is very interesting. This is on our Prisma Wash 100, and it's basically, it's a wash fixture with 33 LEDs, and they're all open in an open scoop reflector that creates a rectangular shape that's evenly spread. So you don't have a traditional hot beam in the center of the fixture, but this is more of just to almost 100% of that UV is focused to illuminate that whatever is in that rectangular space. So, I mean, that was very interesting, and a request from the market.
I feel like that's pretty specific. So what kind of, customers were you talking to as you were developing this Prisma series? I mean, obviously we can see, haunts, Halloween environments, themed environments as a general. Can you expand on that a little bit? And perhaps other influences that we took on that side of the product range?
Yeah, specifically, we talked to some major theme parks, and we also talked to some graphic design companies that deal with UV effects, and that they were mainly looking for IP65 rated UV light that didn't have that hotspot. So they needed that wide even spread. Because of the designs that they would have, they needed an equal amount of UV across that design. So, yeah, I mean, this definitely helped all of those questions.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Matthias can speak to this a little bit as well, how sometimes outside of the entertainment industry side can really influence, like in this case, optics for a very unique product offering. How does serviceability, since we have Inez here as well, and we sort of had a distributed product in Ontari that we are still distributing as well. So if you guys want to buy your Ontari product, you can still buy through us. But what did that play into us developing this Magmatic product offering? And what did we learn and try to integrate into that side of things to make serviceability and longevity a little bit more part of the equation?
So like I mentioned, well, I was just going to hand it off to you, but like I mentioned, our Prisma series they're all IP65. And we use this similar model to the Proteus series. So yeah, go ahead, Inez, if you want to take this one.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, from a service standpoint, the typical issues that we see are I don't want to blame the user per se, but if they take more precautions, there's no need to send them in for servicing. Most of the time, we just see improper fluid. They're for example, on a phase machine, they're running oil-based fluid through it, things of that nature. The other thing too is improper storage. So, like for example, worship sector, we'd see them use a certain type of machine, like say a snow machine, around the holidays, and then park it. Well, the pump would eventually dry up and lose its prime. So, you'd either have to replace it or you'd have to service the pump itself, which is just simply cleaning it and adding a little WD-40 so the diaphragm kind of resumes its prime. But for the most part, we kind of took those lessons and incorporated them in Magmatic, meaning we're using the same sub-suppliers because they're tier 1 type products. So you'll notice that the pumps are top notch. The heaters themselves are being manufactured by us, but it's again the aluminum, everything. It's top quality. The difference I would say with Magmatic in particular is that we've just kind of built it up a little bit. It's a little bit more sophisticated in the sense that the components, the electronics, there's more options to it than previous type foggers that we distributed. So, if you're using the proper fluid, you're probably not going to have a problem. It's going to be, reliable. The only other thing too that we see within the foggers, typically when they come in for service, is incorrect voltage. So oftentimes, because of the heater, it's drawing so much amps, you're not going to have a auto detect power supply. It would be cost prohibitive. So you're going to purchase it. It's going to have a 120 volt heater, and the things would come in for issues, and turns in they plugged it into 208 or something of that nature and blew the PC board. So again, if customers were just a little bit more attentive to the maintenance guidelines, we probably see almost no service issues related to that type of product line.
Interesting is also that we took the experience we had from our IP fixtures. On Prisma, there's a couple of them that are in the sort of the same family as our Paladin product range. So we know a lot about IP, and that's something that really we could transfer over into Magmatic and take advantage of this actually.
Yeah, I think that concept in general, sharing across technology, right, was a big push with the whole Magmatic line. Something we learned from some of the products that we had been selling for many, many years with great success. Anthony, can you expand a little bit on, say, like the menu systems and the design and how we're using that across multiple fixtures, all of the product that we're going to bring to market, just to make sure serviceability is really forefront?
Yeah, absolutely. The controlling solutions was something that we thought needed a facelift in particular. So I actually have a Chris right here, and I'll show you a little bit about the menu. So every machine, every Magmatic fogger or atmospheric machine is going to have a LCD touchscreen. And this is across the board. Every machine is going to offer this, and you're going to have multiple options here to control it. You have a timer, you have a manual button as well. And then the machine will also come with 2 inputs. And these inputs can be used for receiver cards that we're developing right now. They're going to be a wireless DMX option, a Wi-Fi app, and an RF remote option as well. And you can use any of these. It comes with 2 options. So, whatever you feel like you need to use for different applications, especially rental, you have that option there. And then you have a wired remote option, which is a 4-prong connection. You have your in and out 5-pin DMX, industry standard. And then we have a 3-prong IP rated power connector. So this is standard for Magmatic across the board. And this basically covers a broad audience of users. So very user-friendly controller solution.
So kind of the concept of shared in many parts as humanly possible across the entire line. So stocking and servicing becomes super easy. Correct.
Yeah. So many foggers out there in the market. You have a small remote, you have a little remote, you have this SKU, you have that SKU, and it gets a little complicated after a while. So with this, it's one remote for all, basically, for all machines.
Another interesting feature is actually that we, when we did the Obsidian line, we went with a certain paint process and a certain texture, and we actually utilized some of that in Magmatic as well, because we learned how to coat products that they really resist damage for a long time, that the paint doesn't peel. And as if you deal with fog machines, you have the fluids, there's chemicals involved. People are messy when they work on these sometimes, need paint that is really, really durable. And that's actually something we took from the Obsidian line, that we actually the processes we use there, we apply those to Magmatic as well. So it's another example of how we actually work together across these different brands and product lines to share our knowledge and make sure that the products, as we evolve them, get better and better.
Yeah, definitely. This is a beautiful paint. You got beautiful texture, and it's a great cohesive, great collaboration of ideas from Elation and incorporated into the Magmatic line as well. So
I think that's definitely something that leveraging our collective experience over the course of several decades now is bring our own atmospheric line to the market, and being able to sell that globally and offer that continuity to our customer base across the board is something we really wanted to have. So before I move into the next phase, we did see a question about UVC. We do not have UVC products. Entertainment application UV and UVC, totally different. And that's not something that we're exploring with the Magmatic line at this point, correct, Anthony?
That's correct. Yeah, it's a totally different spectrum. We're going to stay in the UVA.
So you touched on this Admosity. What are we going to do with the fluid, right? That's our fluid line. Give us a little insight on there.
Sure, yeah. Admosity was, it is a recommended fluid for Magmatic, but it is a premium fog fluid option. We are going to be using it. We're going to be developing our own fog fluid, haze fluid, quick dissipating, low-lying snow fluid. So actually it's going to be a wide range of fluids that we'll be offering. And the thing with Atmosity is that we have a very strict purifying process. And this was something that we had to analyze because, like Kenneth was mentioning, there's so many issues with buildup in the clogging of the heaters and clogging of the pumps. So the purification process and selection of the chemical components that go into these fluids is very, very important, and we're very. It's a lot of rigorous internal control. So we do use a cosmetic grade cosmetic grade chemicals, and which are much safer. And then the water has several steps of filtration. So all of these steps and these processes we've researched, and I'm proud to say that we're putting that and incorporating that into Admosity. And these fluids are going to be just avoid more. They're more preventative maintenance. So because sometimes when you're in a rental company or you're in a production company, you need to move quickly. You don't know who's putting what fluid in there. But with Admosity, you have a little more protection because of the quality grade of the fluid. So that was something we definitely researched and invested in.
And where is the fluid being made right now?
Currently, our supplier is in France and Europe.
Fantastic. So what's next for Magmatic? We know we have Magma Prime now. We have the Crisp series that is coming in July. We have Admosity that's coming now. We have Prisma that's available today. Mm-hmm. What's the next stages as the product continues to launch from Magmatic?
So right now we have haze machines, our Thermator series. We have two coming out in a few months. It's Thermator 600 and 800. And these are oil-based haze machines in a road case. So they're highly insulated for quieter applications, but give you that festival, raw haze, fine particulate effect. So I'm really excited about those. We also have the Rocket series, which is our CO2 simulators. Those are water fog-based machines, and we have three of those coming out: Javelin, Sidewinder, and the Tomahawk. The Javelin and Sidewinder are the 1500, and then we have a 1600 watt Tomahawk, which is a huge beast. It's awesome. All of them come with LEDs, and they offer that CO2 effect without the CO2. And then we also have a Magma fan that's a low wattage, high powered fan, easy to set up, very easy to pack up, and discreetly put anywhere you need. So.
Fantastic. Well, I think we'll open it up to some questions and see what the world wants to hear about. I think I see a question for Hinez that relates to flexible LED builds versus rigid LED builds. Excuse me. What are your thoughts on that, Hinez? And Matthias, maybe.
What's the context as far as like?
I'm assuming it's flex tape versus a rigid fixture.
Linear.
Correct.
Well, I mean, being that we're also, our sister company Acclaim, that just has to go with needs. Oftentimes, there's a price point too where the tape could be a little bit more affordable than, for example, a rigid linear fixture. So that can be an issue there as well. So it just depends. So sometimes it's dimensions, it's the space that you're putting it in. For example, a cove. So there's certain limitations, but there's no right or wrong when it comes to that. It's more of a design preference and the build itself. So for example, on a contour, a bar build, that kind of stuff, you're going to see tape being used versus a rigid linear type fixture. And again, overall too, cost comes into play with that too. So sometimes the tape is just a better option because it's more flexible, it's easier to play with, it's easier to dissect and spread apart, whatever it may be. So, me personally, I've used tape more often on some projects that I've taken on than an actual rigid linear fixture.
Great. A couple more questions seem to be related to the service side, so
sure.
That's good. One is related to older products and parts availability, and how do we manage that?
So
let's get discontinued from sub-suppliers. So what do you do there?
So for the most part, I mean, we typically have quite a bit of older stuff, and in particular, that pertains more towards our Latin America clientele, because they have a tendency, budget's always an issue. They have a tendency to keep things a little bit longer than for example, the U.S. or Canada. So it's very rare. I mean, we just barely now the design series, which was kind of when I started, 2007, by 2009, somewhere around there, we were already into the Platinum series. We just started phasing that out. So for the most part, we keep it for a very long time. We can't keep things indefinitely. So, we've had people call in looking for parts on fixtures that are, 15, 18, 20 years old. That's just not going to happen in any industry. So if you've known you have a product for a while, either start looking at the cost benefit as far as keeping it going versus something that's a little bit newer. Prices are depending on what you have. It might be more feasible to invest in something newer. But for the most part, give us a call. Typically, we have a pretty good boneyard as well. We like to keep just for what ifs. But for the most part, I'd have to say the only thing discontinued at this point is design series. And even on the older parts, we don't toss them. Typically for some of our seasoned products, you can reach out to Light Parts, and they typically absorb some of our older product.
Awesome. Those Light Parts are pretty good at keeping parts for a lot of fixtures. They're great.
Yeah.
Another question I think that we get quite a bit, and we're seeing here, is training. I know that you have a specific focus on training and how Elation approaches service training.
We do. So rather than having a generic one, we run into clients that, for example, they may have a ton of our fixtures, but it may be across 3, 4, 5 SKUs only. So it's not like a hodgepodge. So typically we'll tailor our training specifically to their needs and towards their inventory. We try to do it on a more intimate level, like maybe, for example, 2 to 3 technicians max. And again, it's usually 2 days. We do require that they are technicians, and we'll go over all the basics and the shortcuts to them. Provide them with all the literature they need as well. So again, training is always available. For our dealer network, we don't charge for it. As a matter of fact, we provide lunch, and we will kind of help you arrange the logistics as well. You can contact me. You can send an email to service@elationlighting.com if that interests you. Again, that is through our dealer network currently.
Awesome. Anthony, there is a question related to if you're a rental house, what would be the first product that from Magmatic that they should be looking at?
Recommendations for rental house?
Yeah, if you're a rental house, what's the current offering that you would have from Magmatic to take a look at?
Sure. I recommend all of them. Magmatic specifically was, we designed it so that it was resilient. Even the snow machines, our Thermator series, which is coming out this summer, and the Magma Prime. We actually will offer a road case for the Magma Prime, but we covered every category as far as haze options, water-based haze options, snow machines, and CO2 simulators. I mean, they're all basically the materials are all the same, and they're all serviceable. So I recommend looking at the whole list for rental companies and production companies.
Where can people get more info on Magmatic?
We do have magmaticeffects.com, and you can also go to Elation Lighting and go to products, and you'll find Magmatic as well. You can collect all the information you need. And I also have the Instagram, Magmatic Effects, and Facebook, and I respond to any questions if you guys have any for me.
Great. And that's magmaticfx.com, not
you could type in both FX or effect. So yeah, so it goes to one.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've really much run through all of our questions and our content for today. I want to thank Inez. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. Give us some
Thank you, everyone, for participating today. And pardon me, please stay safe.
And Anthony, thank you as well.
Yes, thanks for having me. It was great talking to you guys. Appreciate it always.
Matthias, it's always a pleasure to have you here, my friend.
Yeah, thanks to Ines and Anthony for joining us today. It was fun. Really had a lot of fun, on the Magmatic launch with Anthony. So it's good stuff. Looking forward to see this hit the market.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
So join us next week as we move back into the tools and techniques track. And we're going to be focused on theater and opera lighting. And we have quite the lineup next week with John Freilich from the Metropolitan Opera, Bradley King, multi-Tony award-winning and nominated designer, Jason Lyons, and Jeff Kreuter as well. So please tune in next week, same time, and you'll see the marketing and the logins coming very shortly. Thanks so much. Enjoy your week.